Appreciate that. All right, here we go. Tesla is up quite a bit today, up about 5%. Hit 420 on the high. Overall markets, Dow Jones up 1.5%, Nasdaq up 2%, S&P 500 up 1.5%, Russell 2000 up 1.7%. Russell 2000 was the one that jumped quite a lot in the morning, but that was the high of the day for small cap stocks. It was a kind of interesting reversal throughout the day that Russell 2000, the small cap companies were leading at the beginning, but then the Max 7s picked up quite a bit. JP Morgan announced earnings today. We're going to look into it a little bit. Wells Fargo, BlackRock, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, lots of companies announced earnings, so lots of banks announced earnings today. Crude oil is pushing higher to $80 per barrel. Actually, let's bring in Stephen Yutzi blessing us today if he has any time to join. We're going to talk about the CPI data that came out this morning. We're going to talk about the yields and see if people think this is going to continue. CPI came in at 0.4%, higher than the expected 0.3% and higher than the prior 0.3% for December. Core CPI was slightly lower than expected at 0.23% versus, data was pretty much exactly. Steven, what'd you think of today's data?
I didn't know what the expectations were going in. I saw that people said that it was.
For 1 second, let me just fix one thing on YouTube. I think the audio quality on YouTube is a little scratchy. Give me for 1 second. Let me just fix one thing on YouTube. I think the audio quality on YouTube is a little scratchy. Give me 1 second. Please continue, Steven.
Hopefully my audio is all right. I'm driving today. But I was going to say, I didn't know what the expectations were going in, but it still seems like inflation is running far above their 2% target. So it looked like CPI was 0.4 on a month-over-month basis. And I know they target core and they target core PCE, but it's hard to get to 2% inflation when you have 0.4% month-over-month on headline CPI.
Yeah. The year-over-year CPI has been increasing for the last 4 months, which is really interesting to me. Obviously, this is in part due to the oil prices rising, but also some services inflation, like transportation services, has been elevated as well. Airline fares, we've seen both on PPI and CPI coming in hot. Just in a point into that baby boomers are still traveling. They're still going on vacations, especially to Europe, in the US, booking cruises. And that's the part where it's still elevating inflation. And it's kind of interesting because they benefit from higher interest rates. So I don't see how they can, and they don't have mortgages, so they're not really hurting from high mortgage rates. They've already paid off their houses. So I think baby boomers, and they're in their 401ks, at record prices. Baby boomers can continue to keep spending. What do you think about that trend, demographic trend?
I agree with everything you said there. There's a lot of people that I think 40% of homes outstanding have their mortgage paid off. So if you have your mortgage paid off and your personal balance sheet's in a really good position, I think your ability to spend is going to be elevated. And I think that's what we've seen is that there's continues to be strong demand throughout the economy, even though interest rates are high. I do expect, though, that we would probably start to see construction layoffs start to happen in the next 3 to 6 months if rates stay high, because builders and stuff like that will lay off employees from people not wanting to build houses and things like that. So that's kind of what my expectations are at this point.
Yeah. Any other takeaways on inflation before I bring Jimmy up? Any other takes on inflation,
What?
CPI,
Why do you?
PPR? Go ahead.
Why do you think oil has been going up so much recently?
Well, I mean, it's been low for a long time, right? People have been waiting for a rise in oil prices. Although geopolitical risk seems to be coming down a little bit. There was a deal made in Gaza, as I understand it, and I think the Ukraine war will probably be ending soon too. But so that's it's a good question. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, and U.S. I know U.S. doesn't necessarily make the exact same type of oil. Like there's light sweet crude, and then there's other different types of oil. But U.S. oil production continues to increase. So uh, yeah, I don't understand why oil prices are going up, and I don't know if there's like some obvious reason that people had besides maybe inflation.
Yeah. Well, let's bring in Jimmy and see what he thinks. Thank you, Yutsi, for coming up quickly. Oh, error, adding Jimmy. Interesting. Let me just try again. I'm going to send him an invite to speak. I think that works better sometimes. Um, while we figure out what's going on with Jimmy, you'd see any takes on Tesla stock surge?
No, not really. I mean, it had fallen pretty dramatically, fallen $100 a share in a pretty short period of time. So I think some bounce back is to be expected. I think it's a pretty volatile stock right now. So I don't think going from 375 or 380 a share to 420 is a huge bounce, considering it was at 480 less than a month ago.
Yeah. So you do expect this to continue?
Yeah, I expect volatility to continue, especially with headlines around Trump and Elon over the next 1 to 2 months. I think there'll be some volatility in the market as well. So I think larger daily moves, I think, should be expected in Tesla stock in the near term.
Okay. What about markets overall? Do you think today's bounce, surge, really 2% would qualify probably a surge on the Nasdaq? Do you think that will continue?
Yeah, I do for a couple more weeks. I think the market had kind of stair stepped its way down, and so I think having some sort of snapback rally. There's quite a few people bearish that were on Twitter, so I think sentiment had got pretty negative over the last few weeks. Um, but yeah, I do expect some sort of rally here into end the month.
Okay. Any other? Oh, what's the latest call of your boy Jem?
Similar. He expects. He's maybe even more pessimistic than I am. He expects that we might see like 6.5% on the 10-year this year, which I think is partially crazy. But yeah, that's what he's calling is for the 10-year to remain elevated, and I would agree with that. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think that's what might lead to some sort of meaningful market decline in the first quarter of this year. Is if suddenly expectations go from, hey, when are rates going to drop, to, hey, does this mean that the 10-year might stay at 5% for a long time? So that's what I'm kind of expecting. I think he's maybe expecting something similar, but I think he's expecting a little bit higher rates in the 10-year. I thought he said 6 or 6.5% this year, which I don't think we're going to get that high.
I'm going to take some notes. So Jem expects 6% to 6.5% on the 10-year this year. Um, what's his reasoning? Is it more technical analysis? It sounds like the gap fill that you talked about the other day. He does more technical analysis than fundamental.
Uh, no, well, he's got kind of two sides of it. So there's one that uh, he's been an options maker for a long time, or traded on the floor of the CBOE for a while. But the other one is more structural. His point is that he thinks the United States is entering a period of structural inflation, and so that's more of like his broad view, long term macro call that kind of reflects that. He also called for 5% 10-year last year. We didn't quite hit that, but he got within the vicinity, and I agreed with that because
Are
I
you
do
just
agree with that.
repeating his predictions to me for coffee bets?
No, I'm not quite as optimistic. I'm like somewhere between where you are and where he is.
Okay. You said he got a pretty impressive call on like the day that the market was going to fill a gap, right? What was, do you think that was luck or do you think that was skill?
I'd say like 70% skill. Like I think there's still some element of luck. Nobody can predict the future, and I'm not claiming that he can or any market participant can. But I think we've seen in the last few years that the derivatives market, the options market, is it's kind of like instead of some people say it's the tail wagging the dog, but now some people are saying that the options market and stuff and the derivatives are the dog. And I think there is some element of truth to that. That there's a lot of hedging and things like that around some of these large options expiration dates. So calling for big moves around options expiration date, I don't think is necessarily like a bad call or bad reasoning. So I think that's what drives a lot of that is positioning and things like that. Kind of like what we saw right around the options expiration date in December. I think Tesla
Yeah.
peaked maybe 2 or 3 days before that.
Yeah. What do you think on home builders? KB Homes announced some big numbers. They've been up and down, very volatile. This is coming on the back of home builders dropping very substantially in the last couple of months here. I'm sure you watched the Altus Research latest update. What are your thoughts on home builders and real estate market?
I haven't seen what have home builder stocks done the last like 15 to 20 days. I saw they dropped pretty significantly into mid December, but I hadn't checked in on home builders since like mid December.
Mid-December, they've been flat, but they went all the way down throughout the year. And then since beginning of the year, they're up about 5-10%, depending on the stock.
Yeah, I mean, my view hasn't really changed since then. I think it's going to be hard for them if rates continue to stay elevated. So I think that's why we kind of saw them repriced a little bit towards the back half of the year. And I think you even shorted some of those home builder stocks last fall, which I think was a pretty good call.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking to see if I want to short again because there's a bounce. But yeah, I don't know. I don't
I
know.
mean, to some extent, I could see this market rallying coincide with rates dropping temporarily. So to some extent, that makes sense. Like if we see the 10-year pull back to 4.5% or even get a little bit under 4.5%, I could see some sort of rally there. And that's probably, I don't short stocks personally, but if I was, that's probably where I'd short is after the 10-year had rallied for a bit. Because I mean, the 10-year has kind of gone crazy the last 45 days or so.
Yeah, it really did. It's down 12 basis points today. You think it's going to go to 6%? Do we have a coffee bet on that?
I think we got five. I think I locked in 5.5%.
Oh, we did? Okay. All right. I will check our coffee bets. What
We do
else?
still have our outstanding coffee bet from last year about 5%. So
Right.
I haven't even hit my first one, and I'm already making more bets. So I don't know how good this is for the overall health of my personal finances that I'm making bets before my first one are cashing.
Yeah, I mean the highest that we got to I think was, let's see, 4 points, 8 something, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. I want to say somewhere within 20 basis points, I think.
Yeah, we did. That was crazy. That was wild. I mean, it was going up almost every day. And people tell me the UK gilt is actually going up higher even faster. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Does Jen
What are
have
your
the well,
what are your thoughts on like the bond market and things like that this year?
I don't see how we can like these yields can go any higher. I think the pressure on the economy is already very high. So um yeah, I just don't see it.
Isn't it interesting though that rates started to kind of rise meaningfully right as the Fed started to cut?
I mean, yeah, like they're two different things though. I don't know. I'm not as surprised about it as a lot of people seem to be, I guess.
Like to me, that signals that although the market was kind of pricing in a cut, I think the market's somewhat signaling that uh, the Fed is very, very skittish to get inflation below 2%. And like what I've been saying for over a year now, I think 2% is now the floor, not necessarily the target. And so there's been a few times where, depending on what measure you look, people say, oh, wow, the Fed's already reached its target. And then you look at headline and core CPI over the last 3 months, and it's still not at 2%. And we've been talking about that for what, almost 3 years now.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see 2%? I mean, these oil prices are kind of
No,
making it very difficult.
0% chance we see 2% core CPI this year.
0% chance that we see 2% core CPI this
I
year.
guess I guess maybe like 5% if we saw some sort of like massive recession with downward move in prices. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say like maybe 10% chance then is probably more
Yeah.
realistic. And I'd take any coffee bet on anybody that wants to take that the Fed hits 2% core CPI or even core PCE if you want to be official.
Yeah. Well, let me think about that one. Let's see. We get to Beige Brook in about 45 minutes. Empire State Manufacturing was down 12.6 points today versus expected -2 and versus prior +2. And this is a January read. January read has been coming in a little light, don't you think?
Yeah, but again, manufacturing's just not a huge subset of the economy. So if you look at like the jobs data, I think there was even a loss of manufacturing jobs in the December jobs report, if I remember correctly.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's about 10% of the economy. Let me see. Tomorrow we're going to get retail sales expected to be plus 0.5%. Retail sales XO they expected 0.5. Then we get initial weekly claims, export import prices, business inventories. For January we're going to get NAHB housing market index, and we also have Philadelphia Fed index tomorrow as well. And then Friday we get starts on the permits and industrial production and capacity utilization. Lots of data to come this week still. Um, Go ahead.
I think the only other thing I'm watching is kind of the past 2 3 years, rates have always been falling as we head into January and February, and that's kind of hurt. Housing inventory hasn't been able to build as much in the springtime, and so now that rates have been going up into January timeframe, people will start listing houses. So I'm kind of watching how many new listings hit the market over the next 45, 60 days. Because I think a lot of people pulled listings last fall as rates continue to go up because they thought they weren't going to list their houses for sale over Christmas and Thanksgiving. So that's maybe the one last piece of data I'm really watching is what new inventory hits the market in housing over the next, let's say, 60 days.
Yeah, I mean that's what your boy started alarmish too about the new home supply or the new listings from existing owners. Mortgage rates are above 7%. I think they went up to as high as 7.5, which is wild, crazy. Not in a million years I would have thought this was going to happen 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, but one benefit that the housing does have is spreads are a lot better. So I mean, if we get the spreads of 2 years ago, the rates would be over 8% right now for mortgage rates.
Yeah. Redfin says rates are expected to be volatile and stay around 7% for the foreseeable future. Anything else you want to talk about on the macro front?
No, you said I haven't had the chance to look at much from like a equity side of things. So I don't know. Like you mentioned bank earnings and stuff. It sound like we're happening this week. So I don't. I was just gonna listen in on what's been happening on that side of things recently.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about a short position on a bank or two, but I think it's a little too early. And I mean, they've been very depressed for since the Great Recession, really. And finally, they're getting some relief from deregulation expectations. But I think some of the things that Trump wants to do, I mean, we're already seeing him walk back a couple of the things that he discussed on tariffs. We saw Elon walk back his 2 trillion cut to spending. And so I think these things are just going to take time. I think it's a little premature for, markets to price in everything promised all at once, even before inauguration. So JP Morgan Chase today is up about 1.7%. It's a $700 billion market cap company, by far the best run bank um, in the country. And then second best is Goldman Sachs. They also announced, and they're up 5.4% today, also at all-time highs, at $189 billion company. And Goldman Sachs, but they're going up for different reasons. JP Morgan is going up for net interest income expectations, but Goldman Sachs is going up because of M&A expectations. Um, it's going to be interesting to see if these M&A expectations pan out, you know. So I'm looking for a potential short on banks. What do you think?
What do you expect for, like, let's say the S&P 500 peak to trough decline this year? Because that would kind of influence if the market falls, let's say 20%. Obviously, you'd expect some stocks to fall more than that, some to fall less. What's your expectation from like a broader market decline this year?
Yeah, I think 20% sounds about right. And it depends on what the incoming administration does, obviously. There's a lot of uncertainty. So um, I kind of feel like the policies that are coming in, the same playbook that they had in 2016. And I think just the environment is different today. And I don't think he's ready for that. So I guess we'll see. I don't know.
I agree with it. I was expecting you to say a lot more than 20%. So yeah, I could see a somewhere between a 10 and 20% decline this year, even though I'm not necessarily forecasting a recession or anything like that. Um, One other point that I was going to make that Jem has been making is related to China, and it is kind of an interesting take. He thinks that not that there's a greater than 50% probability, but I think it's greater than what the market's pricing in, that in the first year or two, Trump works out some sort of deal with China, where right now everybody kind of views China in a very negative light. They see it uninvestable, things like that. But he thinks there's maybe, in the last podcast I listened to, he thought somewhere maybe between a 30% chance and a 40% chance that some sort of deal gets done in China. And he obviously talked about the what kind of market implications that would mean if suddenly Trump was able to kind of, in the whole art of the deal negotiations, work out some deal with them, which I thought was interesting because I definitely don't expect anything to. I expect Trump to continue to play hardball with China, but if he does work out a deal with China, I think that's obviously very, very bullish for Chinese equities.
Yeah, maybe. So you're saying that, I mean, yeah, that would be pretty amazing. I mean, this guy already made a deal with Gaza, already made a deal with Ukraine. Sounds like, um, so maybe we'll get the China deal tomorrow. When is the inauguration?
Yeah, I mean that would be crazy, but at the same time, that long term, that might not necessarily be bullish for American companies. I mean, just imagine if there weren't tariffs in place right now, and Tesla could be exporting their vehicles from the Chinese factory into the United States. Well, not just Tesla too, like all the EV manufacturers over in China.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really pay too much attention to these things, to be honest with you. I don't invest based on speculation on the government side, government policy, but something to keep in mind. I think Tesla's problems are more around. I think BYD is a problem for Tesla, and I think FST robotaxis are going to take longer than people think. But um, are you driving it on FST? Are you using FST?
No, I do not own a Tesla right now, not yet.
Oh, okay. Um, do you have any thoughts around V13, robotaxi timeline, Optimus?
I've always been kind of in the middle where I think it's great software. I think it's improving, but it's not there yet. So I'm probably more bullish on it than you are now, but I'm probably more bearish on it versus you 12, 18 months ago. So I think it'll get there in the next let's say 2 to 4 years probably. So I don't think it's going to be there this year, but uh, if the market does start to price that in, I think obviously there's huge upside opportunity, and it just depends on how forward looking the market is and how close Tesla gets to proving that it can solve it. It's not necessarily when does it solve it, but when does the market finally have belief that it will be solvable?
Did you say Tesla's going to get there, like robotaxis, in the next couple of years? Is that what you said?
Like 2 to 4 years, I expect, and not broad based. I think they'll like. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think there's gonna be a robo taxi ride this year. At least not for like general public use. There could be like some very small beta trials and things like that, market by market. But um, yeah, I'm less bullish than what Elon is.
Yeah. Um, there's a culture bet you can make on robotaxis
What's the bet?
this year.
But again, so it just depends on the rules. Like I think there's a chance that, like a pretty good chance, like I'd say 75 or 80% chance that there'll be robo taxi rides this year. But if that's a group of 200 people that live in Texas and it's like some super small sample size, I wouldn't want to lose a bet because there's 200 people in a private beta that are using it or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see. I mean, even I don't know. I don't know how they would do that in Texas, even like 200 cars or something.
Like if they made it available to just these employees that live in a neighborhood and they're transporting them to and from the factory or something like that. Like I could see a scenario where that happens, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the software is solved.
Yeah. I don't know. Any thoughts on Nvidia?
No, I mean I think there's both bullish and bearish case, so I think it's priced fairly.
Really? Wow. Okay. Ryan?
Hey, Yaman. I was just curious to see if you have Tesla with FSD.
No.
Okay, yeah, I have the hardware 4 on a 2023 Model Y. Live in New Jersey, and the performance is pretty insane. I've had one disengagement on 13.2. It's incredible.
Okay. Ryan, when do you think Tesla will have nationwide robotaxis?
Nationwide's impossible to predict because we don't know if there's going to be a national standard or if it's going to be state by state.
What do you want to predict?
I think they'll be able to do it this year based on my experience.
All right. So you're saying that
Like
Tesla will
at
have,
least from a technical perspective.
okay. So you're saying Tesla will have driverless rides this year somewhere in the country.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. And how many people do you like? How many robotaxis do you think this by the end of this year?
That depends on how quickly Tesla can get approval for it. I understand not all states have any rules about it, but some of them do.
Okay. So, but see, here's the thing though. Like you're being vague, right? I'm trying to kind of get you to make a prediction, and even you, even though you said performance is pretty insane in Jersey, you asked me if I'm driving a Tesla with FSD. Even you, as bullish as you are unwilling to, you know, put a line in the sand. So what are you
Because
putting a line
we've never
for?
seen It's just because we've never seen this
Yeah,
before.
but I don't really like your vagueness. Like, where you, if you're not gonna contribute anything, why are you disrupting my conversation with UC?
Yeah, I can't predict specifics, but I'm telling you, I just want the audience to understand the performance is like insane.
I think the audience understands that there are a lot of people out there who say FSC performance is insane. So you're not adding anything new to the conversation. You see what I mean? Just come back when you're ready to add something new and valuable to the conversation. All right. Tesla FSD track. Go ahead, UC.
How much do you follow that one chart that shows the performances on like a scale of 1 to 10 for all those different criteria? Do you like?
Oh, is that the What was
I
his name?
forget. Yeah, I don't know who posted. It's not the FSD tracker. It's like
Right, right.
there's somebody that makes a chart, and I feel like
Qualitative one, right?
yeah, if
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
and my whole point is like if you look at that, every major version it seems to kind of solve kind of one of those areas, and so I think I'm probably similar to what Machine is, where I believe it probably requires a version bump up in hardware, so probably more like hardware 5 and a little bit continued tweak of the software to get all those things. I don't know if they all need to be to 10, but there's still some like clear gaps where I don't think they'll be able to release the software if, for example, it doesn't work with like police vehicles and emergency vehicles and things like that, which I know they said they're going to be hopefully solving here shortly, but I think there's like some clear limitations where it's not going to be released until some of that stuff's figured out yet.
Yeah. I don't really follow it that much. I think the limiting factor here is miles to critical disengagement, which I think is about a couple of hundred miles, and it's been there for some time now. So I don't really see that changing anytime soon. And the fact that Tesla can't get V13 on Hardware 3 cars is somewhat surprising to me too. Like by now, I would have thought that Hardware 3 cars would get some sort of rollout going. And the majority of the cars on the roads today are still on V12. And I said maybe by March we'll get a wide release. But they're sending 12.6 to Hardware 3 cars. So that kind of tells me that maybe they won't send V13 ever to them. Um, I don't know. Interesting. Yeah, and then you have this like hardware 3, hardware 4, and it's still like a couple hundred miles per critical disengagement. It's like, where's the 10 times improvement that we were talking about last year? Elon was tweeting about last year from 12.4 to 12.5, and none of that really happened. So this is actually this kind of progress of FSD is actually even below what I expected a few months ago for V13. The rollout speed is low. The improvements are kind of skittish, um, and the ride quality is improving. I think the ride quality is getting smoother, less kind of jittery in the videos I see. So that's great, but is that really going to lead to a take rate increase at $99 a month or a pickup for vehicle sales? I don't really see it. You too?
Elon has obviously historically said that he thinks FSD would be solved in the next year, but I don't think up until recently we've ever heard him talk about that window being less than a year. Like it's always been perpetually 6 to 12 months out. But recently, when he talked about having uh, robotaxi be solved like within the next quarter or so, what do you make of that? I guess first of all, and then the second question would be, what do you think he says? Let's say in the Q1 conference call when basically that would be your 3 month time frame sometime in April.
Sorry, what was the exact quote that he said? Yeah, about 3 months.
Yeah, I don't have the quote pulled up in front of me, but he said something about FSD being solved like in the next 3 months.
I think he said FSD unsupervised will come, but or maybe something along the lines of
That sounds right.
better than human. I don't know. I mean, I don't really see how that's different from anything he said before.
Do you think it's meaningful? Like, do you find any? Do you think it's interesting that it's now gone from under a year to like, hey, maybe the next 3 months?
Um, I think in May 2017 on a TED Talk, he predicted that by the end of the year they would have, coast to coast. So, I don't know. I don't really. I mean, we have crowdsourced data. We know what it is. We don't really need to take management word here on this stuff. Anything else? Anything else so far? Let's see. Yusuf, did you see comments by Microsoft about canceling a project or pausing the construction of a data center project? and then also laying some people off, hiring freeze. Do you think Microsoft is in some sort of trouble here?
No, what was the context around that? I
Which
didn't
one?
hear the Microsoft one. I didn't hear anything about hiring freeze or data center pause or anything like that.
All right, let me just read you. Microsoft pauses construction of portions of $3.3 billion Wisconsin data center. Tech firm cites scope changes due to new developments in related technologies. Microsoft has put on hold parts of the construction of a $3.3 billion data center in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, to potentially incorporate new designs. They say, we are currently reviewing our plans for the second expansion of a Mount Pleasant data center. A company spokesperson said in a statement, we have paused early construction work for this second phase while we evaluate scope and recent changes in technology and consider how this might impact the design of our facilities. What do you think?
Nothing burger. I mean, it's one data center and they're making some tweaks to it. I don't know. I can't read into the tea leaves that much to make broader implications for tweaks to one data center.
Well, I mean, if this was kind of a standalone news, then I would agree with you. But this is coming on top of, I mean, I've been saying for a year plus now that Microsoft, I think, is overvalued. In the last 1 year period, Microsoft has drastically underperformed the markets. S&P 500 is up 25%. Microsoft is up single digits. And that's despite all the buybacks they do. And they also see tremendous decline in their cash and cash equivalent balances. So, something's got to give. Their free cash flow has been stable. They spent tens of billions of dollars into building this AI training capacity and buying, I think, 20-30 billion dollars in building data centers in the last year alone, and then also tens of billions of dollars into investing in OpenAI, and all the drama that came out with it, etc. And they have nothing to show for it, which is kind of crazy. How I mean that this might be the biggest investment that just didn't pan out, aside from some sort of big M&A transaction. I mean, what was the AOL transaction size? Do you remember in 1999?
2 billion or something. I don't think it was more than 10.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, AOL was acquired by Verizon for $4.4 billion. No, sorry, that's a different one. Hold on one second. Um, Let me see. Hold on. Biggest M&A deal ever. Vodafone's acquisition of 183 billion. AOL Time Warner was merged for 182 billion dollars. But I think, was that a stock transaction or was it cash? Let's see. I mean, I'm trying to find out, is this the biggest investment that just like flopped in history?
Yeah, I think most of those were stock transactions, and I'd be curious. I don't have it pulled up in front what Microsoft's operating cash flow is. Uh, so, like, how much cash do they have every quarter to invest in projects and things like that?
All right, listen to this. Largest M&A transaction conducted entirely for cash was Heinz's acquisition of Kraft Foods in 2015, valued at $63 billion. It was structured as a merger of equals, but involved a significant cash component. 3G Capital and Berkshire Hathaway facilitated the deal. If you're referring to specific details were purely cash transactions, then the Vodafone acquisition of Mindsman, valued at 181 billion, holds the record. However, this transaction involved a mix of cash and stock. Um, what was the cash? I mean, but these are companies that are still operational and generating free cash flow. Like it's not like Heinz Kraft went to nothing. But Microsoft, there's no evidence that they've generated a dollar of profits so far from these investments. And man, it's so crazy. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in my life. This kind of investment. You asked about Microsoft operating income, right?
Yeah, operating cash flow.
Operating income was in the last 12-month period, it was about $113 billion. Let's see, operating cash flow. Um, TTM $122 billion according to Yahoo Finance operating cash flow. Man, it's so crazy.
Like that's kind of the thing is they just print so much cash that even if
Oh,
they, what'd you say?
they print so much cash. Yeah, you're right. You're saying they can't waste tens of billions of dollars and have no consequence?
No, I mean, I think the stock and stuff would pull back over those scenarios, and I think you could be right. There could be a scenario where some of this AI hype and stuff gets flushed out of the market, where only the people that are showing true revenue and true profits and stuff from these endeavors get rewarded. Uh, and obviously, who knows when investors will care about that stuff? Up to this point, they haven't. But I think
Well,
Microsoft, if we're talking about,
who is benefiting from this? Like, who is generating cash and profits from AI?
I mean, OpenAI and Google and stuff, they have, I don't know how big there's
OpenAI
subscription
unprofitable.
services.
OpenAI is
Well,
unprofitable by a
well, I
lot.
don't think, yeah, they're not profitable, but they have revenue.
Yeah, they have revenue. Yeah, I'm only talking about profits right now. There's
Oh, I
no
don't think
doubt.
any.
I mean, even Tesla's generating FSD revenue. But where are the profits? I mean, these are massive numbers. Like, it's not like you're buying gum at the store. They're spending tens of billions of dollars buying GPUs, developing ASICs, hiring people, financing projects. Where is the money? Show me the money. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those stocks would take a hit, but companies like Microsoft that have such a moat around the enterprise business space, they're almost like a utility at this point that just prints insane amounts of cash every year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they say that about Apple too, and there's just so many questions about Apple these days. You heard what Zuckerberg had to say about Apple. They just don't seem to be able to solve some of the easiest software issues that iOS faces. Um, Siri is a shit show. I mean, it's so bad. The amount of progress Siri made in the last decade is like zero. ChatGPT integration is horrible as well. I'm like, why the hell would I? Like, yeah, it makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Um,
I think long term, Microsoft's going to perform a lot better than Apple will.
yeah, I mean, you're probably right. You're probably right. I mean, Apple may have peaked. I mean, Warren Buffett sold like most of his investment, and that's as of September 30th. I wonder if he sold more in December. Crazy. What do you think about Zuckerberg, Meta in general?
His ability to pivot and adjust to different market conditions, I think, is impressive. I think any executive is going to make mistakes. I mean, you can look at basically every single executive and point out the mistakes they've made. I think back to the metaverse and the mistake that Facebook and stuff had made with that huge bet. And then in 2022, fall 2022, Zuckerberg just kind of shifted and was like, hey, we're going to pivot a little bit. And their stock was rewarded for it. And I think kind of what he said recently about the results of the election. He's not ahead of it, but he's like a close follower, and I think that's almost anything. That's almost all you could expect out of a executive, not to necessarily always predict what trends are going to happen, but be a close follower if trends do change. And I think he correctly pointed out that X's community note system is a lot better than what Facebook currently uses. So yeah, I've been impressed by Zuckerberg for a long time.
Okay. Let's see. Any thoughts on Cybertruck?
Uh, no, I mean, it'll
Production
be.
ramp, profitability, total addressable market. Would you qualify it as a successful product launch? Where do you see Cybertruck program going?
I think there was more demand for the Cyber Beast and the high end expensive trims of the Cybertruck than I anticipated, and I'm just kind of closely watching what the demand elasticity is as price falls. I think they kind of soaked up all buyers that are willing to spend $80,000 to $100,000 on a truck at this point. So I don't have thoughts on what it'll be, but I think kind of the next move is that they're going to make this truck in the 70 or $60,000 range. Maybe let's say maybe 60 to 80,000 is maybe more appropriate with options and stuff. And it'll be interesting to see what demand looks like at that level. But um, yeah, I don't know if they're really going to make much more than let's say one or 250,000 per year. I don't think they're going to get to 500,000 or anything like that. So I think it's going to stay higher than what X and S production was back in the day, but it's not going to get to like Model 3 volumes.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Have you ever driven it?
No, I've been in one, but I've never driven it.
Yeah, if you get a chance, do so because it's actually like it's really fun to drive. It's kind of surprising how agile it is, and that steer by wire is a game changer. You know, um, I had high expectations for this product, but it doesn't seem to be playing out, unfortunately.
And I think honestly, the engineering challenges and stuff that they solved with it, like you pointed out, with steer by wire and uh, all the other challenges that they had to solve to put it to market, I think that can be used in other vehicles and stuff like that. So even if Cybertruck never meaningfully ramps above, let's say, 100,000 units a year, I'd still consider it a success because that's basically like, I guess you could call it expensive R&D that they can use for other things.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, think about it in a limit. If we think 5 years or 10 years down the road, I personally am not going to be investing in Tesla because I think Cybertruck is doing like 2 million units a year or something like that. It's always going to be, I think, a less than 500,000 units a year. And if that's the case, what did it contribute? Maybe $10 or at most $20 a share of earnings to Tesla's bottom line. It's not going to be meaningful.
Yeah. In YouTube live chat, somebody corrected me and says Microsoft's hiring freeze is not on the whole company level, but it's in consulting business. And yeah, that's correct. Consulting business. All right. Anything else you see we gotta talk about? I was gonna say one more thing. So we talked FSD, we talked Cybertruck. We talked Microsoft, Nvidia, macro, housing, inflation. All right. I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Let me see. All right, let's call it a day then. All right. Thanks for coming up, man. Appreciate it. And I'll chat with you next time. Take care, everybody. And chat tomorrow. Chat tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow I may not be able to because I'll be traveling, but we'll play by ear. All right. Take care. All right. Let's call it a day then.